Good evening everyone, look at this. Just applied the Sand and Sky face mask. Felt a bit weird at the beginning. It was really nice to apply actually. There was like this little brush thing where you just brush it on. But it felt a bit kind of like, I don't know, almost burny. But now it actually feels quite nice and it's drying. You have to leave it for 10 minutes and then I will take it off. We will see the results. I'm also gonna apply my usual glow drops after this, but I've got this enzyme powder polish which I keep meaning to use, so maybe I'll give this a go. I don't know if I can use it after I've done the face mask, but I think this says you just pour half a teaspoon of powder into the palm of your hand and then with a couple of drops of water rub together to form a foam, gently massage into the face, rinse and reveal the glow. So we're having like a full-on glow up evening. Well, it's dry, so I think I'm gonna wash it off. I don't know if I'm gonna leave it on. It's at 10 minutes. You know what guys, I haven't got a flannel. How bad is that? I'm gonna have to try and wash it off. Oh, okay, it comes off quite easily. Well, I've got to say my skin feels rather lovely now. It feels very, very nice and soft. So I'm very pleased with that product. Now I'm going to put my usual glow up drops on. I love these. These are literally life. They're my favourite. Just one on each cheek. A little bit on the nose. They smell so good. Guys, the weather really is terrible today. It's so rainy and wet. I didn't even bring an umbrella. I got a bit soaking on the walk here. But wearing some of my favourite shorts. I love these Aztec shorts. Today I thought I would film my full leg session. So I'm starting off with RDLs and mainly focusing on posterior chain in the session. We're just doing a warm-up set with the barbell to begin with. So I'm probably doing about 10 to 12 of these. Next I'm moving on to a little bit of hamstring glute activation. So I really like to do this back leg kick and I really focus on the contraction in my hamstring as I do this. This is because when I do the RDL or the Romanian deadlift, it's mainly focusing on the glutes and the hamstrings. So this is a warm-up set. I'm just doing it with 15 kg on each side. It's significantly lower than I was doing before lockdown, but I'm still kind of just getting into the weight training mode again. I think because obviously the first couple of weeks I was still prepping and on peak weeks I was taking it really easy. It's just taken a little bit longer to get back into my usual gym routine. This set's a little bit heavier and this is actually my working set today. I'm doing, I think it's about 10 to 12 of these. And again, I'm just hinging at the hip, really focusing on time under tension, trying not to let the barbell bang on the floor. And then working the hamstrings and squeezing the glutes as I drive up with the chest. I'm just doing another set of the glute activation exercise or the hamstring activation exercise because again I want to make sure that when I'm doing my sets I'm really focusing on the muscle groups that I'm meant to be working. I think it's really important to do this because so many people, you know, they do ego lift and they do just try and throw a weight about but not really focusing on the muscles they're meant to be contracting, and it makes such a big difference to your training once you start doing this. I'm just doing another working set at 60, so it is fairly light for me. I could have made my eccentric movement a little bit slower on that. Next, I'm going to move on to good mornings. So again, it's a hinge at the hip. We're working the glutes. We're squeezing the glutes as the chest drives up. It's pretty much the same movement as an RDL. What I do often is I superset the Romanian deadlift or the RDL with the good morning, which is a bit of a brutal superset. But this morning I wasn't feeling it, so I didn't. Then we're adding 10s on each side. And we go into our first working set of good mornings. One thing with good mornings is it's quite difficult to do the right technique if you don't have the flexibility. And what I would suggest to quite a few people start off is to actually do a good morning seated or kneeling, just because it makes it a little bit easier and you then don't have to focus quite so much on keeping a straight back with the technique, just because you're seated. So you're just kind of leaning forwards. For this, you want to try and keep the legs as straight as you can, just so you can really work those hamstrings. And then I'm re-racking and getting a little bit heavier. So 50 for my good mornings. And I think I do 3 working sets of these today. My technique's starting to get a little bit. So I think for the 3rd set, oh no, I did. I actually did keep the 5s on. So it's a priority to always make sure you're focusing on good technique with every exercise you're doing, rather than trying to lift heavier weight and then the technique be compromised. As you can see, towards the end of the set, I was getting quite tired. And I did do one more set without the 5s on. You can see a little bit of a wobble in the hamstrings and the glutes for this set. That's where I was a little bit fatigued. So it was a good time to go to the gym because it was very quiet and it was a great time to film. I think there was one other person downstairs. Next, I'm moving on to leg press. I actually decided I'd do wide leg press. So I've got my feet fairly wide and then they're coming all the way into the chest. And again, I'm going fairly slow on the eccentric movement. The eccentric is the lowering movement, so as my legs come in towards my chest. The next exercise I moved on to was the hack squat. This is actually a really good exercise to work the quads, and it's a fairly similar movement to if you're doing a squat. You want to keep the back straight and make sure it's flat against the pad, and then you're driving up through the quads and controlling the movement as you're lowering down. So I said, for most of the session, I was focusing on the posterior chain or the hamstrings and the glutes, but I did also do some quad work. You need to believe in all that is true. The sooner the better. You need to believe in all that is right. The sooner Then I moved on to leg extension. Again, this is a quad dominant exercise, and it's probably my favourite quad exercise. So I'm doing pause reps. I'm pausing for a second at the top and then slowing it down on the eccentric as the legs are lowering down. As you can see by my face, it was quite a difficult set. And I'm doing a drop set, so I'm going immediately into the next set at a slightly lower weight. I tend to go to failure whenever I do this leg extension exercise. And actually on quite a few of my exercises, I find I can push my body really hard and I don't really often get benefit unless I've gone to failure. And I'm not sure if that's just because I guess training's kind of ingrained into me and I've done it for such a long time. But I prefer to go to failure at a slightly lighter weight and do more kind of like hypertrophy sessions rather than just ego lifting or doing like strength sessions where you're doing your 5x5 or 5x3 reps. Now I move back to hamstrings. So my gym is kind of split. So there's the main free weight section downstairs in the basement, which you've just seen. And then upstairs, there's all the kind of, I guess, the weights machines. So I decided that I would kind of go upstairs and do the majority of the rest of my exercises. And this is an exercise I never used to do. It's a seated hamstring curl. I used to always prefer doing the laying hamstring curl, which I do later. I think someone was on it prior to me doing it. But actually, I find this exercise is really effective. It gets the hamstrings working really well. You just need to make sure you pause for a second as you bring the legs in. So you really get that hamstring contraction again. And I think one of my friends came over, someone I knew at the gym, who hadn't seen in a while. I supersetted the seated hamstring curl with single leg press. And again, this was a really good exercise to focus on the hamstrings and the quads as well. But both machines are next to each other, so it makes it a lot easier if you want to superset if you're in a commercial gym. Whereas if you've kind of got a busy gym and you're trying to superset, it just doesn't really work. So I'm going nice and slow on the eccentric again, focusing on time under tension with everything that I'm doing. I never used to be a fan of hip thrusts, but now I've really taken to them, and actually I think they're very beneficial, especially if you focus on the pause at the top of the movement and really squeezing the glute, which was the main focus of the hip thrusts. And if you have got a glute builder, this is a glute builder, then it makes it a lot easier to set up your hip thrusts. If you don't, then what you can do is you can get a bench and then just use a bench and a barbell and put the weights on the barbell. Your shoulders or your upper part of the back needs to obviously rest on the bench, but it doesn't work as well as if you've got a glute builder, just because it's an easier setup. Also, you want to make sure you have a pad across your kind of the front of your hips, otherwise it's very painful. And I think that's what put me off originally doing these hip thrusts, because I could never actually find a comfortable position to do them with. Now I'm moving on to hyperextensions. And to be honest, I don't find these work very much. I think I've got a very strong back from doing all the kind of contortion handstand back bends, and I really find it difficult to find a weight unless I'm using like a 25, and then it becomes more a bicep workout for me. I do find it difficult to actually make this exercise work for me, but still I thought I'd do it, and then I did a hold at the end, which always intensifies the exercise. You want to make sure when you're doing these hyperextensions you're not overarching, so you're really focusing on lifting the chest up to a straight line, squeezing the glutes, slowly lowering the chest down to the ground. Most people probably feel it working the lower back, the glutes and the hamstrings. Now I'm moving on to my favourite exercise of all times, the laying hamstring curl. Now this, again, never used to be that effective until I started doing the seal kind of hamstring, seal position, on this laying hamstring curl. And this is because you're driving your hips into the pad, and then it actually means that you're focusing properly on that contraction of the hamstrings. And before, I just don't think I ever had very good mind muscle connection with my hamstrings, whereas since kind of changing my hamstring exercises up and including this and including activation exercises, I think I've managed to actually start to grow my hamstrings, probably for the first time in a long time, and also make the exercises feel like they're really effective and working. Why am I not like her? Baby, more so. Why must the curtains come down? Why must the curtains come down? It's soften now. In the end, wish to leave something special. Let him talk, as long as my name is on their lips. Call me mysterious. Lastly, I did go back downstairs into the basement bit and I did calf raises. Now again, this is something I hadn't really worked on in a long time. I've done them in one session prior to this, and just because I don't really know, I just never really work calves, when really, you should. There's no reason not to. I'd really like this machine actually. I hadn't used it before until I came to this gym, and you literally just put your feet on the little platform at the bottom with your calves hanging over the edge, and then you're dropping your ankles down, you've got a weight on the side, and then you're driving up. So you can see it's really working my calves well. As you can see, everything I do is focusing on time under tension. I do a lot of kind of pause reps, and I slow the eccentric down on a lot of the exercises. To have an effective session, it's really all about the intensity of the exercise. So it's really important you do this. At the end of the calf raises, I just did a little set of kind of smaller movements and quickly trying to go to fatigue or failure.
Why is it hard on my own? Why am I not like her?
That is a session wrap. It was a pretty good session actually. I mainly focused on posterior chain because I really want to grow my hamstrings and have more kind of muscle definition and shape in the backs of my legs, and also my glutes. The only thing I didn't do was lunges, which I would have liked to do if I had a bit longer, but because time was a little bit restricted today, we didn't quite fit them in, so I'll make sure I do them in my next leg session. As I said, that was actually a good session. Obviously I got quite a lot of exercises done. I didn't do my lunges, which I'm a bit disappointed about. I actually wanted to do barbell front foot elevated split squats because they're my worst but my favourite exercise. I feel they really work the glutes well, but I hate doing them. they're not very nice. Anyway, I've got an hour to get ready now. I'm also going to really think this week about changing my split. I'm not going to do push-pull legs because I feel like some areas like my posterior chain do need more work than say my quads and also my glutes, so I'm gonna split my sessions up a little bit differently, and then also forever trying to work on the shoulders, the delts, all these areas, and things like the chest. As much as I love training chest, there's not really much place in training chest for female. Well, you know, you can train it lightly, but there's no point in doing like a dedicated chest session for what I'm aiming to achieve. So I really have to think about the goals and, you know, the kind of specific areas where I want more definition, or to just slightly change the shape of my body. So that is what I'm going to think about with my training. So I will see you later.